Good afternoon and welcome back to another tutorial. Now I'm not really sure how I'm going to describe what I'm going to create today, but it's using this amazing piece of driftwood or sun-bleached root that I found on the beach in the summer, and you can see it's got an amazing soft sandy sort of colour to it. Now it's a really interesting piece of what I think is probably a root and the stem of a plant. It's probably been washed around a lot in the sea, so it's sea washed and then it's been dumped onto the beach on a high tide and the sun has bleached it, and it's got beautiful texture. It's an amazing piece. It's quite lightweight, it's easy to use. And I thought it was going to look really good on this tall container that I've had for a number of years. This is a container that I think it's probably plastic, but it's been made to look like bamboo, and I felt that the theme and the harmony of the two worked quite well together. This tends to change colour depending on what design I'm creating, but today I've used some rose gold spray paint just to cover the original dark green colour that the container was the last time I used it. And for the moment I'm just resting these two pieces of the root on top. Now when I picked it up it was one whole piece, but it didn't get home in one piece, so now I have these two really interesting shapes, and today I'm just going to use them sitting on the container, but I could glue them into place or I could use some wires to secure them. But because I wanted to take them apart to show you, I didn't want to attach them to the base. So I've got this lovely twisty, turny, unusual sort of shaped branch, probably the original stalk or the root of the plant, and then I've got this more massed section which I think is the root of the plant. Whether it's going to go back into the design in the original place I had it a moment ago is another thing. But the beauty of this is that it just sits quite nicely on the top of my container. It wouldn't be any good for delivering, but it would be fantastic for an interpretive design, for a flower festival, or for even competition work. But it sits really nicely on the top. It balances really well. So the other piece I'm going to bring across the sort of front section so that we have some movement. You can follow the lines of those elegant branches, and then we have a little bit more concentration of the heavier root. I've got some floral foam on one side of the container, and I'm going to use on the other side some of the little plastic vials that we often use in floristry. These come with flowers. They're often on orchid stems or anthurium stems, and I keep them so that when I want to create a more abstract or an environmentally friendly option where we're not using floral foam, then we can use these lovely plastic vials. And I've got them in a few different sizes. Now that's going to balance quite nicely on there, hopefully. And I think I've probably got the last of the locally grown flowers for me here in South Wales. I've got a local flower farm. I've used flowers on the YouTube channel from them many times, and these colours are just amazing alongside that very sandy coloured piece of driftwood. And to go with them, I've got the very popular Dahlia. This is called Lait. It's a massively popular colour for a Dahlia in wedding work, but to me those colours work so well together. And this design isn't really a traditional flower arrangement. It's more like an abstract or a conceptual piece. And it doesn't have any sort of set rules or patterns. So it's something a bit different for you to see. I could, if I wanted to, have put another piece of floral foam in here. And I did experiment with that, but it was harder for me to balance the driftwood on the top. And it meant that I had a lot of area to cover with the floral foam. And I didn't want the design to become quite clumsy and very heavily covered in foliage. Right, so let's see what we can do with this one. Let's just move it back while I work on it. Now the front section here has given me a lot of front movement, so it already starts to create that depth in the arrangement that you hear me talk about over and over and over again. And depth, three-dimensional depth, is really important in this particular arrangement. because it's a tall container and I've got a heavy piece of driftwood on the top. What I don't want the design to do is to tip forward and fall over. So I need to make sure that my materials are balanced at the top. There's weight front and back, otherwise it's going to tip over. Now, all I'm going to do is add some of these amazing dahlias, almost entwined in amongst that driftwood. Isn't that colour absolutely gorgeous? I did consider using some dried hydrangeas as well, because the colour on that was very similar, but I'm going to stick with these two hydrangeas and what I would describe as an outdoor grown chrysanthemum, and I'll talk about that again in just a second. I'm following the shape of the driftwood from one side down to the other. I don't want to hide that piece of driftwood, so I don't want to overfill, but I do want to almost make like a continuous line of the hydrangeas from one side to the other, so that we've got almost like a solid block. This is more about interpreting the movement and the shape of that lovely piece of driftwood. I'm just going to put this one a little lower down so it's sitting on top of the floral foam. And to get it lower in the foam, I'm just going to take off that corner section. Because I've got that quite severe right angle there, it's stopping this dahlia coming low in the foam. Now there are a couple of petals falling off the dahlia, and that really is because they're at the end of their season. But how's that so far? Isn't that lovely? And it's a good one for interpreting maybe the seaside or the beach or a holiday maybe that you've been on if you're doing competition work. So you'll see with this one, I've popped that into the plastic vial, making sure that the stem is in the water. And then I can sit this in that position there to continue that colour coming through right the way to the top. Now I think I'm going to need a few more flowers. I've only got one dahlia left, but that's okay. That can just fit in on the end there, so that colour comes all the way through to the end. The only reason I haven't put foam in that section there is because it made my driftwood more unstable. So it was easier for me to work with the little plastic vials. But you might have a container that holds a bigger piece of foam. You might want to use chicken wire or some recyclable material. But for me, this was the best option to use. Now I also have, and these are locally grown as well, this wonderful salmon colour trailing amaranthus. They're quite short stemmed because I have used these over the weekend. I did a wedding fair on the weekend and I took these to the wedding fair. So what I'm going to do with these is bring them down the centre of the design, and I can use the floral foam there just to drape them really beautifully down over the front. I'm going to slightly move that one so you can see them more clearly. I might just squeeze it underneath that dahlia, and now we've got some downward movement. The colour links between them are absolutely gorgeous. Fabulous, fabulous design. This is something that I really love to do. It takes you outside your comfort zone and really makes you think about colours and textures and how flowers work alongside one another. Now with a chrysanthemum, now I call these outdoor grown chrysanthemums because they're not like the supermarket chrysanthemums and the florist grade chrysanthemums that you can buy. But I believe these have been grown in a polytunnel. But you can see they're not as uniform as the supermarket grown chrysanthemums, and for me they have a lot more character and personality. So I love using these. And what I'm going to do here is with the ones that have the same sort of colouring as the dahlia, the paler colours, I'm going to use them very low down on the floral foam, almost to cover my foam and but without making the arrangement really chunky and really heavy there at the back. So we're using the paler coloured chrysanthemum almost like we would a foliage to hide our floral foam, and you can see there it's all neat and compact. But if we look at it from the front, it doesn't interfere with the shape of the arrangement at all. But what I am going to do with the slightly different shade is to introduce them in between the dahlias. This is going to give me a really good link between the colour of the amaranthus there, and they're still going to be quite low down and quite compact. So this is what we tend to refer to as grouping, massing, basing. It can be referred to by many different names depending on what part of the world you're in. So massing, grouping or basing, and I'm just going to bring it in between the dahlias, sorry, not the chrysanthemums. And a couple more. The idea with this design is that everything is very close together. There's not any negative space in between the flowers, but it does create some really lovely visual impact. Now this one I would like to put in this section here to bring some colour to the top, but the stem isn't long enough to go into the foam. So here I can use one of my little plastic vials, and then I can insert the plastic vial into the foam at the back, so it'll help raise that flower, and then in a minute I'll cover that with some dried flowers or some of the chrysanthemums. Now my area that I feel needs some colour is this section over here. So what I'll have to do here again is use another one of those plastic vials, because I don't have any floral foam in that section, and I'm hoping that that is going to sit quite nicely in that position there. It takes a little bit of moving around to get it where you want it to go, and that is working really, really lovely. I love the way that's coming together. Now my longest dahlia over here, I'm going to push into the foam to make it a bit closer to the main section. This looks like it's out there on its own and it hasn't got any friends to keep it company. So I'm going to bring it a little bit closer and more compact to the main part of the flowers. And I'm also going to turn it so it's angled a little bit more towards the front, and it'll make more impact then. But isn't that nice? Do you like that? Is it taking you out of your comfort zone a little bit? Now I've still got a few chrysanthemums, but for the moment I'm going to introduce some of the dried bracken. My thoughts behind the bracken is that the driftwood came from the local beach, and in the same sort of area is this lovely textural bracken. So I felt that the two worked well together and would create a lovely harmony. So now I'm going to go a little bit longer. This is going into the floral foam at the moment, but because the material is dried, it doesn't matter if you just rest it on top. It doesn't need to take up water, so it's not important that it's actually in the floral foam. I'm going to be quite disciplined with the use of the bracken because I don't want to make the design fussy and overfilled. I want to keep it, quite minimalist, but with lots of texture. Now I'm feeling that we need just a little bit of height in this section here, and luckily I've got one more of the plastic vials. And for that section, I'm going to place in 2 of the chrysanthemums at slightly different heights. So I'm almost arranging them in the plastic vial before I put them into the design. And I'm hoping that that is going to squeeze in at the back just to give me a little bit of extra height there, because I felt there was a lot of flowers on this side and not enough on that top section there. I think if I had one more dahlia, that would work quite nicely in that position there. But I don't have one, so that's all I can do. Now just a few final pieces of the bracken, just very delicately placed into the arrangement. Then I look at filling in the back of the arrangement to make sure that floral foam is completely hidden. When I turn it round for you to see at the front, I'll just tuck in a few pieces of bracken towards the back. And what do you think of that one? Is it something that you're brave enough to have a go at? This is a little bit more interpretive. I would probably refer to it as more of a piece of modern art rather than a floral design. But for those of you who love texture and shape and have access to collecting different pieces of driftwood or branches, this is a really good way of exhibiting it and showing it off. So what do we think? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Who knows? As ever, thanks for watching. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then please do so. Hit that notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new tutorial. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. So bye for now.